That's a very interesting point then, because well, you mentioned the effect and the importance that music has on you. But then there's also the distinction between the creative aspect and writing it down and then performing it. And as you mentioned, it's you. Should I see it as do you become kind of like another person when you're on stage? What?
Not another person. I'm always myself.
Right.
I think as human beings, we are incredibly multifaceted. You know, we have many faces. You know, we're just the very fact that we exist is a miracle in itself. We're pretty special, all of us, and we're complicated. We have layers upon layers. We go very deep, and at any one point, any one of those faces can be the one you're presenting to the world. Any one of those can be driving you. And so, you know, all of these things, all of those faces exist in me. And I am every single one of those.
Right.
It's just, I just switch to a different face when I go on stage. And that's because of the power that I feel from the crowd, from the songs, from the music, from the energy, you know. I think me on stage is about like, that's about as good as I get, as confident as I get. Not as good as I get, as confident as I get is being a performer on stage. You know, it's very different. If you ever come to an art exhibition, I'm much less confident. The confidence is on the walls. You know, it's very different. Every side of us is different. It's important to acknowledge all of them, and it's important to let them all exist in their own planes. And if you can, let them shine when they need to.
Right.
You know.
So is playing live a very conscious thing for you, or is it?
It's I mean, you kind of enter the ether when you walk out onto the stage anyway, because it's all a play. It's framed. It's theatre. It's supposed to be dramatic. And like I said in the very beginning, I've never forgotten that music is about entertainment. You know, regardless of whether we're writing, you know, rock has always been rooted in struggle as equal as celebration. Right. You know, we write rock and roll songs about excess and indulgence, and quite often we do most of those things because of problems in our life, insecurities, unhappiness. You know, so those two things are absolute chaos. They go hand in hand. It's perfect balance. It's just a nightmare mix of ingredients for a lot of people. And so for me, like I'm half conscious, if that makes sense, when I'm on stage.
Sure.
I'm aware enough of my surroundings to not put anyone in danger. I quite often put myself in danger. But you don't think about that, you just feel the music and you flow, and you just have to, my job is to be the best channel for my songs to the audience. And what I've learned in the years of performing is that actually I want to do that with a smile on my face at all times. And I've only developed that understanding since my daughter was born. Okay. And that came because I decided that if I was going to be away from her for weeks on end, and miss whole months of her life while she was growing up, I needed to make sure that when I was on stage, at least that 1 hour of the day, I was happy.
Well, because now it's a little bit of a question that I already asked, but in that sense, because like you mentioned, there is some volatility in this world, music industry, and then you're away from home a lot. So, but then you accept those things. Why? Well, what is the drive? What is? And then we kind of talked about it already, but
I never said I accepted those things.
Okay.
I find it incredibly difficult. Okay. I find it really hard to tour. I find it really hard to be away from my family. But it is. It's the nature of the beast that I have chosen to let out of the cage. You know, like I have a responsibility to everybody, to myself, to be happy, to my family. I tried to stop music, I really did. I tried to walk away from it. But when you're a creative person, the minute you stop creating, you feel like toxic. You feel a poison in yourself that, you know, you can't ever suppress that kind of feeling. It doesn't go away. It gets bigger and it becomes more violent and more volatile. And so you've got to let it out. And I'm really lucky that I have a very supportive wife. You know, I have an incredibly supportive family who they're really proud of me and proud of what I do. It doesn't mean that it's not without its problems, you know, like, no. Yeah.
In that sense then, because well, you mentioned that you had 2 bands previously and then now things are going well, I think.
Yeah.
So is success a double-edged sword in a way?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, as it grows, as it gets better, you know, more people want you to go and play shows in their town. People start spotting you. You know, you can't take a piss in private anymore. Like, there are elements that come with that. I never got into a band to be successful. I got into a band because I needed to sing. I needed to perform. I needed an outlet that would have been unacceptable in any other job in life, pretty much, you know. There's not many places you can go and scream at people for an hour and be applauded for it, you know. So, yeah.
Finally then you mentioned the effect of having a daughter had on you. And you mentioned also that the last song is for your daughter, kind of going into what world are we creating for our future generations. And I think one of the lines was, "We don't belong in a wasteland."
Yeah.
So where did that line come from?
It was a line about I wrote it about my wife and I. We were in a pretty poor place at the time, both trying to find our place in the world, and I felt incredibly sorry for the sort of world I had surrounded her in, left her in. You know, I dragged her into this place and sort of left her there while I went off to tour and work, and you know, so it's half about that, and it's half about the future that I see happening every day in the world as we go. You know, like, I see things like, you know, Syria, the entire country pretty much has been turned to ash and rubble. It's basically a genocide happening there, and nobody's talking about it really. They're just angry that people are showing up on the shores of their countries for what they perceive as a handout, and it's not. They literally have nowhere to go because we've bombed all of their cities. So it's just no good can come of that, of either of those situations.
Right.
So it was. I mirror things a lot in my life, you know. Like there's a song on the record about called Thunder, and it's about like exactly that. It's about this refugee crisis, and it is a refugee. It's not a migrant crisis. It's a refugee crisis, like, and it's all about that. About how, you know, people in in a position of authority and privilege were making decisions against strangers that were going to affect their lives forever. Mm-hmm. And then when they were turning up, they were refusing them help. They were basically bombing innocent people and then denying them any kind of support. And I saw a lot of similarities in that to how in my own behaviour towards my family.
Very last question then, because you mentioned that you wanted to be happy, and you want to, especially on stage, you wanted that hour of happiness. So with all these things going on, is it difficult to not become cynical in a way, or to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, let me phrase it differently. How do you find that happiness? Is that the expression what we've talked about?
Yeah, I think that I imagine it could be very easy to become
incredibly cynical in the world that we live in, because not much good happens until I go on stage. And then a lot of good can happen, or a lot of bad can happen, and it's on me. I get to choose for that hour. I can choose what happens in that area for 1,000 people, or 10,000 people, or 100 people. I can choose whether we're going to have a good time or we're going to have a bad time, and we always have a good time.
I think that's,
yeah,
I think that's a good ending.
Thank you, man.
Frank, thank you very much for your time.
That was a great interview. Thanks very much.